This is a production of WTVI PBS Charlotte.
The following episode of Charlotte, a City of International Success, is brought to you by Central Piedmont Community College and viewers like you. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Dr. Maha Gingrich. Coming up on Charlotte, a City of International Success, I will interview Natalia Stambuk, and she is a corporate lawyer, and we're going to talk about intricacies of corporate law. Stay with us.
3, 2, 1.
Welcome to Charlotte, a City of International Success. I'm Dr. Maha Gingrich. Today our guest is Mrs. Natalia Stambuk, and she's the Vice President of Multimedia International Group. Natasha, welcome to our show.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me.
Well, Natasha, I have known you and your husband LJ with the World Affairs Council for a very long time. So I'm going to call you Natasha instead of calling you Mrs. Stambuk.
Yes, of course.
And I know actually your name, original name is just not Natasha. It is
Natalia Felixovna Alexeyeva.
I love it. Natalia?
Yes, Natalia. I am Russian originally, and in Russia, there's always a full first name and a short version of your first name. Besides, people also use a patronymic, which is your father's first name. So it gets a bit complicated. So in the US, I'm just Natasha.
Okay. Well, actually, many cultures have that, you know, where you actually take your father's name as your middle name, or some people take father's first name as the last name. So there's all kind of cultures, depends on, you know, what it is. And so, like you mentioned, you're from Russia. What part of Russia are you from?
I am from Moscow. But I didn't really grow up in Russia because my father is, he's a journalist, and throughout his career and my childhood, he was posted in various different places. So I grew up in London as a small child. We were there for almost 5 years, and then back to Russia. And then we lived in the US, in Washington, D.C., when I was an adolescent. And then back to Russia again. So.
Oh, wow. So what did your father do?
He's a journalist, and he spent his whole career working for a press agency called Novosti Press Agency. It is the second largest press agency in the Soviet Union, and now Russia. He's a writing journalist.
Oh, really? So, and what did your mom do?
My mom is trained as an engineer, and actually in something quite complicated, construction of hydro turbine engines.
Oh, yes, hydro turbines, yeah.
Yes, but in fact, because she did follow my dad with his international postings, she couldn't really pursue a serious career in engineering. So she ended up doing various things in life. She speaks English and French fluently, so she worked as a translator. Then at some point, she translated science journals from English into Russian.
Oh, wow. And if I remember right, she's also a musician?
Yes, my mom has a full medical training, and she played piano a little bit and also the harp. She's fully trained as a harpist, but she never really... Oh my gosh,
is there anything she doesn't do?
Well, she hasn't played the harp for many years, but I remember growing up this beautiful harp in our house. But she never really did it professionally. She hasn't done that.
Well, so now your father, you said, was a journalist. So were you traveling because of his job?
Yes, he was posted in his press agency's bureau in London, and then eventually in the U.S., in Washington, D.C. So we spent those years living in these countries.
How many years were you in London?
A little over 4, and same for the U.S.
Okay, so that's where you actually learned English then, or were you learning it already?
Yes, I learned English as a toddler. I've been bilingual basically since very early age, so I can't take any credit for it. I'm bilingual, yes.
Oh, that's wonderful. So you said that you came to United States for schooling as well?
Well, later on, or as a child. You're
as a child?
As a child, yes. So when my family moved here, I was about 9. But at the time, because my dad did work for a Soviet news organization, he couldn't send me to a regular American school. I had to go to a school for children of Soviet journalists and diplomats in Washington, D.C.
We actually had that?
Yes, we had that. It was quite a large school. It was more than 100 children. And our class at every grade level had maybe about 20 kids.
Wow.
And all the teachers came from Russia. We wore uniforms just like in Russia. All the textbooks were just like in Russia. So once you enter the school building,
Yeah.
you can forget that you're in the U.S. You are like you're back in
So
Soviet
uniform
Union.
colors and everything was just
Pretty
like,
much, yes, yes.
was this, so you said the textbooks.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole schooling, whole education system was just like in Russia?
Absolutely, yes. It was exactly the same.
Russia and the
Same-
United States.
Yes, Russia and the United States, absolutely.
Wow.
I think the thinking behind that was, well, of course, when you go to school, it's not that you just study the subjects that you study, but
Yeah.
also you're brought up to in a certain way.
The
And
culture.
The culture, and at that part, the ideological part of
Yeah.
upbringing in the Soviet Union, the brainwashing, if you like to say, that was important too. That's why they didn't want the kids to go into American schools, because they
Okay.
would miss out on that.
Yeah.
And that's why they kept us in a Soviet school.
Wow. In many ways, it does make sense because you want to make sure they infuse the culture wherever you're from, and then you learn that part as well. But I would think it's, how was it for you? Because you're then switching between cultures, right? You were in England, you're
Yes.
in London,
Yes,
then you're in Russia,
Yes.
London,
yes,
United States,
yes.
and then Russian school.
In Russian school. So yes, as you've noticed
that?
correctly, inside the school, it is as if you're in Russia. But then once you leave the walls
Yeah.
of the school, you're living in American, like in every American kid or every adolescent. I listened to the music, I followed the culture, I read teen magazines and all those things. So there was a huge duality to that, yes.
Wow.
But inside the school walls, you had to be like in Russia. In fact, I was even a member of this organization that every kid in the Soviet Union was part of, called the Young Pioneers. So we had
Okay.
a big ceremony at the Soviet embassy, and I became a young pioneer with a red tie,
Oh, wow.
which I wore only in school, never outside.
Wow, that's wonderful. Now, after that, did you move again or did you just stay?
Yes, eventually my dad's job in the U.S. ended, and
okay.
we moved back to Russia, back to Moscow in the early 80s, and I was about 13.
Okay.
That was a difficult transition.
I would think so. So, was it very difficult? Because I would think in early age, during early growing up times, our personality and our thought process also changes. And for you to go back to Russia and try to be part of that culture, even though it is supposed to be your culture, was it difficult?
Yes, it was. The good news, because the school was exactly the same in Moscow as it was here.
Okay.
Technically transitioning, from one school to another was not difficult, because I was exactly at the same level on every subject as I should have
Okay.
been. So that was the easy part. The difficult part is that because I've lived so many years outside of Russia, by
Yeah.
that time, most of my life, it didn't really feel like home. I always felt not quite fitting in. So that was difficult, especially at that
Really?
age. And I always really wanted to go back. But of course, at that time in the 80s,
Yeah.
it was completely impossible. It wasn't even a dream. It was beyond a wildest dream, the ability to go back to the US,
Oh, wow.
really. We lived behind the Iron Curtain, so it was a very...
So were you a foreign girl in your own country?
Not really foreign, but kids did treat me like I'm a little weird. Yes, that was a little hard.
Yeah, I would think so, because you grew up in so many different places. And so after that, what did you do? Did you pursue your higher education in Russia?
Yes, I went, after I graduated from school, I went to university, Moscow State University, from which my father also graduated in history. And I went to the legal department of the university, and I graduated 5 years later with a law degree.
Really? Why did you choose law?
For a number of reasons. Well, I knew that I wanted to do something with humanities. Unfortunately,
Okay.
I'm not gifted in any way. I'm not artistic, I don't draw, I don't sing, and also I'm not good particularly with math or science. So I know it had to be humanities.
Yeah.
But also I wanted it to be something practical. a profession that I could actually make a living of. So that's one of the reasons I chose law. Later on, I found out that my grandmother on my mother's side, she, who grew up in the 1930s in Soviet Russia, she wanted to be a lawyer, but unfortunately, she was not allowed to apply to the legal department of the university because she was from a wrong ideological background, so to speak.
Wow.
So in a
way, that was 1930s.
Yes.
So
she ended up getting a higher education in biology, not an ideological field.
Sciences.
Yes. But yes, sciences. But something like law was viewed as a field where, at that time, the government only wanted children from working class and peasant families to go into. Since she wasn't either.
She was not.
She was not able to get a law degree. But I was many years later. So in a way, I fulfilled her dream.
Exactly. You fulfilled her dream. That's wonderful. So after you finished law, did you take a job there, or what did you do after that?
Yes, I did. I started working. I was very fortunate in that the year that I graduated from law school, which is 1992 in Russia, Soviet Union had just fallen apart, and many Western businesses, and law firms, started opening offices in Moscow. And so I completely by chance walked into a law firm that happened to be the largest in the world at the time, and maybe still. It's a London-based firm called Clifford Chance. And I was the second Russian employee they ever hired. Now I think they have more than 100. It was an opportune time.
Absolutely.
So I never thought going to law school that I would end up a corporate lawyer working for a non-Russian firm. But things changed so much within the 5 years that I was in law school. Soviet Union fell apart, the country opened up, that it was something I was able to do.
Wow. So when you worked with this firm, did you have to travel, or were you in the country primarily doing?
I traveled a lot, both inside Russia and also somewhat outside. Yes, I went to London quite a bit during those times.
Now, so here comes the big question, as always. How did you end up in the United States?
Well, I think as I've mentioned, ever since we returned to Russia when I was an adolescent, I really, really wanted to go back. I wasn't sure for what or how, but it was a dream that America is not completely lost for me. So when I was a university student, my dad, who reads all the newspapers from top to bottom, saw a little ad in one of the newspapers in Moscow saying that the cultural department of the U.S. Embassy is giving a lecture on how to study in the United States. And this was maybe 1989. No one has ever gone to study abroad. This was completely impossible.
Wow.
So he cut out this little article for me, and I went to that lecture. And there were people from the U.S. Embassy who explained a little bit about how the U.S. educational system works, and that it's actually possible for a foreigner to come to the U.S. and to study. And they even set up a special reading room with catalogs of U.S. colleges and universities, so that people could come and continue researching this opportunity, which I did. And I realized then that it doesn't make sense that because education system is different in Europe, in Russia and Europe, and in the United States, it doesn't make sense for me to go to college. It makes sense for me to graduate in Russia and then go for graduate work in the US. So I postponed that for a few years. And eventually I applied for and was admitted to Columbia Law School in New York. And that's where I went for my law degree in the U.S.
That's a great transition. Are you the only child? Or?
Yes, I am.
How did your parents feel letting you go? I know, sometimes it's very hard if you have just one child to let them go abroad, especially.
My mom told me that she cried for a week nonstop.
I can understand
that. Yes, it was hard for them and for me, and also especially because I lived with my parents before leaving for the U.S. But I think they thought that the opportunity is amazing, and I think they were so happy for me. So it was sad, but they were thrilled for me beyond belief.
They were. So once you came here, did you have other people, Russians, at the college, and you were able to just, integrate into the entire system, or how did that work?
Well, no, not really. I didn't really communicate with the Russian community so much. But the program at Columbia University that admits international lawyers is very, very international. So there were people from all over the world. I was the only one from Russia, and a bit of an oddity because I was maybe the first or second one ever to be admitted there from the former Soviet Union. But other than that, there were students from all over the world, and it was a lot of fun.
Did you take a job after you graduated there, after your...
Yes, I graduated from law school, and then I had to take the bar exam, just like everybody else, and that was terrifying experience and perhaps the most difficult thing I've ever had to endure. But whether you're foreign-born or American-born, you have to sit for the same bar exam. And if you pass, you pass, and if you fail, you try again. Fortunately, I passed on the first try.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. And that allowed me to become an associate with a law firm in New York.
Okay. So associate, now what kind of a law firm is this?
It was a mid-sized corporate law firm. Actually, the firm practiced corporate law, litigation, other different fields.
Okay.
But I started in the corporate department of the firm.
How did you end up in Charlotte?
Well, several years after I started working, eventually I left a law firm and I went what in our profession is called in-house, meaning you don't no longer work for a law firm, you work for a corporation as part of their in-house legal department. So you're an in-house lawyer.
Oh, like a personal lawyer.
Well, like
I mean, for the corporation.
Yes, like a
not personal, like a person.
Yes, like a lawyer.
Lawyer dedicated
only
to.
Client is your company.
Okay. Wow.
And so, a legal department can have one person, or it can have hundreds of people.
Okay.
Like some of the bigger banks that we have in Charlotte, their legal departments are almost like law firms themselves. They have hundreds of lawyers, but they work only for the bank.
Gotcha.
So I joined a company that I still work for now, Metro Media. It's a telecommunications company that owns and operates telecom businesses overseas, and it had a legal department, and I became one of the attorneys in that department. And this was in New York still.
Okay.
And then eventually, for a number of reasons, the New York office of my company moved to Charlotte, and the company offered me a promotion to the general counsel position, but in Charlotte.
What is a general counsel position?
It's just a fancy name for head of the legal department, main counsel.
Well, that is fancy.
Well, yes, perhaps.
It is fancy, yeah.
So I have to be honest with you, I've never heard of Charlotte 3 months until we moved here.
Yeah.
So I came on a couple of exploratory visits.
Yeah.
But fortunately, I liked what I saw, and we picked up and moved.
Well, I'm glad you did.
So am I, really.
Because, you know, there are a lot of things you all do that, you know, you contribute to the community, and we are very happy to have you.
Thank you.
So, so you moved here, and now I think, you know, when I think of corporate law, I see it as, especially for an international company, right? I see it as being very complicated because you need to understand, I would think, the laws of other countries, regulations, if you're investing here or abroad. And so tell me a little bit about what is involved as a corporate lawyer. What do you need to know?
Generally, corporate law is a field of law where your clients are companies, and you deal with various aspects of corporate companies' life, the legal aspects of it, how to form a company, how do shareholders inside the company interact with each other, capital structure, who owns the stock, who owns the debt, and how these various interests have to do with the life of the company itself. That's one thing. And then the other thing, corporate law also, part of it is mergers and acquisitions. So you buy and you sell businesses, not you, but you through your company, of course. And also it has to do with securities laws. Companies issue stock to raise capital, or issue debt securities to raise debt capital. So this is what corporate law really is. But as general counsel, I also have to deal with other things. Employment law, because we have employees, so I deal with employment contracts.
Employees you have
of my
here
company.
and abroad?
Overseas, yes.
Overseas, okay.
Tax issues, environmental issues,
Oh, wow.
workers' compensation issues, all kinds of things. So I would describe myself as a corporate generalist. That means I know a little bit about many fields of law.
Wow. That's a lot of information
It is.
that you need to know.
It is. But I really practice American law, technically New York laws. I'm qualified in New York.
Yeah.
And when we need to do something overseas, then this is where we hire outside lawyers, law firms in various different countries, and they advise us on the laws of those particular countries.
Oh, I
so this
see.
is how it usually works.
Do you have to do a lot of research, or do you need to memorize these things and remember all these regulations? How does that work?
Well, research, yes, sometimes, but being a lawyer is not so much about knowing what the law is. I think it's more about knowing where to find it, so knowing where to look.
Oh, I like that.
And also knowing how to apply it, because once you figure out what the law says, you need to understand how does it apply to your situation. So in a way, it's posing the right question and then knowing where to find the answer. But you don't have to have all the answers in your head. So what I think what law school really does very well, it teaches you to think as a lawyer, think analytically, to ask the right questions and where to look for the right answers, not memorizing the laws themselves.
Okay, so you're also talking about research then?
Yes, yes.
Ability to research.
Yes, that is true. Generally, when you start out as a young associate in a firm, this is the time when you do a lot of research because more senior people, partners, meet with clients, ask the questions, and then the associates go do the research and find the answers.
Oh, okay.
But at this stage of my career, I don't really have to do a lot of research. Other people, I have other people who help me with that.
Who help you with the research. But you do know, because you have that experience, you know what to expect and how to guide your associates.
Yes,
You know,
eventually it gets better.
Is there a personality that you need to have to be a corporate lawyer? Do you need to have certain, I know the qualifications, you know, law degree, but beyond that, it really sounds like, especially nowadays, I'm going in a different direction right now. This is a global world. So no matter what we do, no matter where we are, you need to understand other cultures, other international, you know, laws, or at least if you're in business, you need to understand how they function. You know, there has to be that knowledge and the curiosity, intentional curiosity, to ensure that you understand other, you know, countries. If you're going to be in any business, that is, if it's not a small business. So tell me about how does that work?
Well, I think you're very right in what you said, in that you really need to understand how other cultures work. Or at least you have to not come with any predetermined answers. And I think you have to understand that other people do it differently. And as part of my job is figuring out how they do it, and that we don't necessarily have all the answers, and that once you're open to that things work differently in other countries, legal things and just other things as well, then it makes it easier, that you don't come with a set of, you know, sort of preset notions. That is important, definitely, in what I do. Generally in corporate work, I don't know that you have to possess any specific set of qualities. It takes, I think, anyone of reasonable intelligence can succeed in this field. I don't think you have to be particularly talented or particularly analytical. At the end of the day, it's not, you know, rocket science or brain surgery. It's law. Anyone can do it if you are determined and if you put the time into it.
The bottom line is, you know, you're a professional, and as well as you're a mother of 2 sons, I think?
2 sons, yes.
You know,
2
just
boys.
give me in one sentence any advice for people who really want to be both. How do you manage?
I tend to believe that you can't necessarily have everything at once. That if you try to be perfect in everything, you're going to pretty much fail. So I just try to do my best. And having been raised by a mother and a grandmother who've always worked, I don't think that my children are any less because I do not stay at home.
You know, I like that. I like that. And try not to be perfect.
Try not to be perfect and
all the time.
And try not to be guilty about whatever choices you've made. Just try to do your best, and I think that's what it is. There's no big secret about it.
I love that. I love that. And Natasha, it's been a joy talking with you. Thank you so much for sharing all this information. And it's very helpful for people who are aspiring to be lawyers.
Thank you very much for having me.
And thank you for being on our show. And thank you for watching Charlotte, a city of international success. I'm Dr. Maha Gingrich. Please join us again next time, right here on WTVI PBS Charlotte.
A production of WTVI PBS Charlotte.